Very few films, at least to me, have ever come close to replicating the emotional impact of 1989's Dead Poets Society. Many know it for the emotional ending, or perhaps the iconic performance of the late Robin Williams. However, the film has served a role not only as a strong allegory for the queer experience, but also as a strikingly accurate depiction of the gentleness of male adolescence. In this video, I'll explore the themes and principles present in Dead Poets Society, and I hope that it will allow you to better understand the film from a gender-sensitive perspective. As always, my goal is mainly to educate and entertain, so please take everything I say with a grain of salt, and please don't feel as though you must agree with me. If you would like to discuss the topic of this video in the comments, I gladly encourage positive and constructive conversation. After all, what is film if not a vessel for discussion? Naturally, this video will also contain spoilers for this film. With all that aside, let us begin with our discussion of 1989's Dead Poets Society. For those of you who are unfortunately unaware of this gorgeous film, and maybe those who have seen it but can't remember its beats, allow me to illustrate. The year is 1959, and the location is Welton Preparatory School for Boys. We open at a welcoming ceremony at the beginning of the school year. Right away, we meet our main character, 17-year-old Todd Anderson. The film follows Todd and his newfound classmates, headed by the charming Neil Perry, as they explore the trials and tribulations of youth, as well as the depth of poetry and free thinking, under the guidance of their charismatic new English teacher, Mr. Keating. As you would expect from a film of this nature, the plot is rather intimate and touches a chord with the audience. There are countless moments that resonate with the adolescent experience, but the ones I'm most interested with for this video are the ones specific to the male adolescents and queer adolescents. From the beginning of the film, there are clear indications of the typical male socialization. For example, the boys are rambunctious and crude, and they're taught to think one way and one way only. However, we get to see many of the boys experience their own form of individuality early in the film, before the society is even formed. Being the main characters, Todd and Neil are fleshed out early on so we can better grasp their character arcs. Let's talk about Todd. For the main character, he has relatively little screen time, and we don't hear much from him in the first act, or even at all. This isn't our imagination. We're informed early on that Todd has a fear of speaking publicly, and this manifests in a form of anxiety around everyone, even his peers when they're in private. He doesn't like to cause a scene, and he certainly won't go against the majority opinion. In fact, he's so caught up to adhering to society's expectations that he's also referred to as a stiff by future friend Meeks. This changes after some time in Mr. Keating's class, and spending time with Neil, who each give him new, free outlooks on life. Upon the revival of the Dead Poets Society, Todd hesitates to join the boys on their first meeting, fearing the requirement to read aloud. He gets embarrassed when Neil proceeds to confirm with the others that Todd can indeed attend without reading. He ends up taking notes for the meeting and thus maintains his anxious and quote-unquote stiff lifestyle, as Meeks would put it. Shortly after the revival of the society, Mr. Keating assigns the boys to write their own poem and read it aloud to the class. He announces that he's very aware Todd is scared of this assignment, and thus he's not surprised when Todd arrives to the next class claiming he did not complete the assignment. The scene that follows is among the first to really strike a chord with me. Mr. Keating puts his hands over Todd's eyes and urges him to rapidly take more and more steps outside his comfort zone, beginning with a simple yell and ending with an improvised, heart-wrenching, intimate poem that seemingly describes the feeling of having one's true self suppressed. All you really need to grasp the gravity of this moment is the shot of Mr. Keating, trembling in emotion after hearing Todd's words. For me, this moment is strikingly familiar, yet foreign at the same time. It's the experience of finally coming to terms with oneself, or telling yourself a hard truth that everyone else already knows. This should sound familiar to all the queer people in the audience, and this is why I believe that Dead Poets Society is a strong allegory for the queer experience, and this will become more clear when I discuss Neil's character and the things I say following that. Todd has been taught to feel one way for his whole life, and he tries to conform to this feeling up until this point. He already was living under the reputation of his older brother, so he tried to hide under that shadow and hide his true self. When that truth finally comes out in this scene, the rest of the class is stunned in inspirational awe. We get a glance of Neil, and it really shows how precious the pair's friendship is. Let's talk about Neil now. Todd's charismatic and charming roommate, who is also grappling with his parents' expectations, only in a more explicit way. Neil is more poetic and explicit with his emotions than the rest of the group right off the bat, openly trying to dispute his father's decision to drop the school annual for him. However, when faced with punishment, he quiets and allows it to happen, much to his dismay. When the others try to advocate for him, Neil simply states that he doesn't give a damn and that the other boys don't have room to talk, since they do the same with all their parents. It is this moment that solidifies the film's place as a marker for adolescence. Many teens feel as though they cannot speak up to their parents and they must obey their wishes. This is especially true for Neil, as it's clear that his heart yearns for the arts and the gentler things in life. However, he must make do with what his father wants for him, to become a doctor. One of the most touching moments in the film is when Neil excitedly tells Todd that he will be auditioning for a play, which is something he has always dreamed of. However, his excitement is met with an unexpected reaction from Todd. Todd is more concerned with what Neil's father might think. This hurts Neil, and it's very reminiscent of the experience of a queer teenager coming out to their peers excitedly and proudly, only to be met with unexpected concern. Therefore, suffice it to say that Dead Poet Society can be read as an allegory for the queer experience. Further, I could easily liken Todd and Neil's friendship with a queer relationship, and I'm certainly not alone in thinking that. After all, they are one of, if not the most popular shipping arrangement within the fandom. The pair are intimate with each other emotionally, and each have coming out scenes where the other's reaction is explicitly shown to the audience. First, Neil's inspired look from Todd's poem, and second, Todd's concerned reaction to Neil's news about the play. There are also the pair that are seen interacting one-on-one the most, which makes sense seeing that they're roommates.
And they were roommates.
Oh my god, they were roommates.
But come on, you're really going to look at Neil's expression here and tell me he's not in love? The scene atop the roof of the school, in which Neil throws Todd's new desk set into the night, is the only scene where they are truly alone and not in the dorms surrounded by the other boys. It is lighthearted and seems insignificant, as it surrounds Neil allowing Todd to reject a gift from his parents, but it's more important than you may think. In this scene, Todd is not just upset about a birthday gift. Todd is openly rejecting his parents' expectations of him with the help of Neil. This is a tale old as time to queer folks, recognizing that it often takes a queer relationship for a queer individual to finally accept themselves and reject society's expectations. Neil provides Todd with that opportunity, which makes it all the more heart-shattering when Neil's death takes the opportunity away. Todd must face his family again, fulfill their expectations, and return to his conformist lifestyle seen in the beginning of the film. Todd's screams when he learns of Neil's death are grief-stricken and soul-rending. Pure emotion, the sound of someone losing their one and only source of self-expression. After all, if Neil couldn't survive by being true to himself, how can Todd? Mr. Keating provides the boys with many tools and skills for life that they previously took for granted, mainly the ability to appreciate poetry. In the film, poetry stands for emotion, vulnerability, and gentleness, everything these boys are taught not to be. In fact, they're told that they're not old enough to recognize these aspects of themselves, which is honestly pretty shocking, seeing that they're almost fully grown adults. They are 17 years old. They're going to college next year, but yet everyone in their life is telling them not yet. Mr. Keating provided Todd with a voice to express himself and be emotional. And that is how Todd can continue on without Neil. The "Oh Captain, My Captain" scene is a pure tell of the journey these characters have gone through, Todd initially being the last to stand on the desk, now being the first, the beginning of a movement that allows Mr. Keating to have strength in his last moments at Wilton. I think what especially strikes me is this film's ability to show boyhood in such a delicate manner, and show that being male does not mean you are emotionless, cruel, and violent, which is what much of Western media, especially in the 80s era, would have you believe. In fact, only twice do acts of violence occur in the film. First when Chet attacks Knox, and when Charlie punches Cameron for ratting the entire society out to the school administration, leading to Mr. Keating's termination of contract. In the first instance, the violence is warranted. In the second, it only occurs because of a highly emotional event, displaying an accurate portrayal of how some people react to grief after losing a close friend. So, it can be said that Dead Poet Society posits that violence and physical strength are not the core aspects of masculinity. Rather, the film shows us, through Keating, that tenderness, vulnerability, and trueness to oneself are the things that allow boys to become men. The film's focus on boyhood is especially apparent in a scene where Charlie takes two girls with him to a society meeting. The scene is haphazard and messy as the introduction of two girls into the sacred space of the society disrupts what it's for. Suddenly, it feels anxious, and maybe it's just me, but in this moment I resented Charlie for introducing such a sacred tradition to people who it was not meant for. Now, saying that, Charlie is one of my favorite characters. I just feel like, in this moment, not good. By no means am I saying girls shouldn't be allowed into some male spaces, but in this case, I feel as though a restriction is warranted. It's for the same reason I posit men should not be allowed in certain female spaces. The Dead Poet Society was a space where the boys could express themselves emotionally and be vulnerable, sharing their writing and things that connected with them on a deep level, expressing their manhood in a way that was unconventional and unaccepted by the girls. To illustrate what I mean, take the character of Knox Overstreet, who I mentioned earlier. Throughout the film, Knox courts Chris, the daughter of a Welton alumni, who is also dating all-around macho jerk Chet. After being assaulted by Chet at Chris's party, Knox appears at Chris's school to give her flowers and read a poem aloud to her, thus baring his soul to her, and being incredibly vulnerable in a way he likely never has before. According to the values of the film, this is the most masculine thing Knox could do, yet he's ridiculed for it. On the night of the play, Chris confronts him and says she has, quote, been made a fool of, thanks to his emotional display. This is an example of some women simply not being able to understand the importance of vulnerability to masculinity, and how even today, men will be ridiculed and villainized for expressing themselves. On my first watch, in the first act of the film, I found myself becoming saddened by the scenes of the boys bonding and laughing with each other because I thought I was mourning the boyhood I never got to have as a trans man who came out in his mid-teens. However, upon finishing the film and then rewatching it, I understand that under Keating's teachings, I did get to experience the core aspects of male adolescence. I got to explore art, I got to be vulnerable with my closest friends, and I got to be proud of the truest form of myself. I did get the ability to transition not only from female to male, but more importantly, from boyhood to manhood. My perception of the film used to be that it made me yearn for an adolescence I did not get the privilege of having, but now I understood that it was nostalgia for the adolescence I did have, just not in the same physical form. While I did not experience adolescence the way the Dead Poet Society did, I can see myself in their experience, and appreciate the similarities faced by us. I can take the society's teachings of strength and vulnerability, and thus remind myself that I am a man, not despite my emotions, but because of them. As I stated in the introduction, very few films have touched me to such a degree that Dead Poet Society does. Perhaps it's because I can relate to the struggle of the discrepancy between masculinity and emotionality, or maybe it's the similarities I see with my queer experience, making me feel seen by these fictional characters in my television screen. Regardless, Dead Poet Society strikes me to my core, and never fails to move me in ways that no other media can. I can confidently say that no film makes me feel prouder in my identity than Dead Poet Society does. Its ability to bring me near or to tears at the very mention of it is unmatched, and this is why I'm shocked to see so little academic analysis of it. There is no film like Dead Poet Society that can allow me to say, with the utmost sincerity, that I'm proud to be a man on a day like this. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it and want to see more, feel free to give me a thumbs up and subscribe. It really means the most. I want to give a big shout out to all my lovely friends who've supported me throughout my transition, since I doubt this film would mean as much to me without such an experience. If you haven't seen Dead Poet Society, I highly suggest you go check it out, as it's on Disney Plus right now, and who knows when it'll come down again, seeing as it's been circulating across streaming platforms for the past year or two. And not gonna lie, if you don't have Disney Plus, you didn't hear it from me, but once again, feel free to leave a comment to discuss, and thank you again for watching. This has been Peanut Putter, and I'll see you all next time.